a group of players may have just found a backdoor into an RLCS LAN. And before we get into it too much, we are on board with Snowy watching a scrim that was played today. A scrim for players who play in the Sub-Saharan Africa region of the RLCS, a region that historically had spots in Worlds but no spots at Majors. But that has changed. Now Sub-Saharan Africa will have a team that is representing the region at each Major and Worlds. But reality, will they? Will they actually? Because there are new rules to the RLCS. The previous rules were that you had to reside in the place that you were playing RLCS in. And because Sub-Saharan Africa, who's a little bit newer to the RLCS and therefore has less of an experienced roster of teams, they have been the target of players who feel like they should be in the RLCS but can't quite get there. The bubble players on the outside of mostly North America and EU have always wanted to get into the RLCS and been jealous, if you ask me, of the fact that Sub-Saharan Africa has been able to get in without being maybe quite as talented. In fact, there was a team, in case you didn't know, in the previous season of the RLCS that said that they were going to take a vacation in Sub-Saharan Africa in order to play RLCS there and qualify for a major. And in fact, it started a huge storm on Twitter. Should teams be able to do that? Is it ethical for them to go there and just try and farm SSA as they seem to be doing? In fact, they got a ton of flack specifically because of the way they handled it. They made it sound like it would be for free and really disrespected the Sub-Saharan Africa region. But they ended up not going. So it's hard to say whether or not they would have done as well as they thought they would because they ultimately decided not to do it. But the new season brings new rules. As I mentioned before, the new rules are that you can now play any region from anywhere. That's right, you don't have to be in a certain location to play in the RLCS. All you have to do is pick the region that you're going to play with and stick with that region for the rest of the year. So if that means you are a European player, maybe living in London, and you decide to play in the Sub-Saharan African RLCS, you are locked to Sub-Saharan African RLCS for the rest of the year. If you decide afterwards because playing on super high ping doesn't work out for you and you don't qualify, well, there is no other option. You will have to continue to play SSA for as long as that season lasts. But there are players out there who feel like they probably have no chance at LANs going through the EU region that have decided to play on 160 and 180 ping. So what we're going to do today is we are on board, like I said, with Snowy. We're taking a look at how this scrim of the top SSA teams looks, how the players look, and whether or not we think that the next replay that we're going to watch, which is a scrim also from today, from the team that is going to be playing in Sub-Saharan Africa, whether or not they are truly going to take over like they think they will. Now, a lot of people are not really giving as much flack as they did for the North American team that was going to move over, but I think a big part of that is that the North American team was incredibly disrespectful in the process of saying they were going to take over, whereas this EU team is a little bit more of, we're just playing the rules. The rules say that they can do this if they want to, and so they're going to. They're not necessarily saying they'll for sure farm. They're just saying, we'll get 160, 180 ping, and we're going to try our best to qualify for LANs. Now, playing on 160 and 180 ping is pretty ridiculous. You guys probably think of the times that maybe Saudi Arabian players have queued into NAE servers and have been able to get wins on 180 or so. Or maybe you would think of the times that KV1 played Fahad in actually one of my tournaments, a 1v1, in which both players had 130 and 160 ping, and actually the player with 160 ping won, but he was playing against someone with similarly high ping. So it's hard to say. Also, all of those things that you've seen in the past are actually games that have been played with one or two people on a team, 1v1s or 2v2s. I think that ping actually affects 1v1s the least of any of the game mode, and if you don't understand why, it's because interactions with the ball are really what changes with lag, specifically other players interacting with the ball on your screen. Now, when there's less players on the field, there are less laggy interactions to be had, and more time you have on the ball all by yourself, therefore less affected by the ping. Now, 3v3s are worse. 2v2s, we've seen some success, but historically, when any RLCS team of real caliber plays on opposite servers, it gets boring because almost all games are just won by the team with the better ping. And this, branches over a pretty wide level of skill ability that you would think like, oh no, well this is a top EU team playing, a pretty lower NA team. They'll certainly be able to get significant wins even though they're on other servers. Well, no. I mean, historically, it's just been wins over to whoever has server advantage. But this may be one of the biggest differences in both ping and ability we have seen in a while. So that was your SSA scrim. Let's hop into our EU bubble scrim. Now we hop into the POV of Nuggets, a player who has played on stream a few times before, a very talented 1v1er who is playing alongside Motion, the guy who recently debuted in his first show match, and Riho, all English players who are playing in an EU scrim right now, but are planning to play in SSA. So, get a look at this scrim, and you can decide for yourself whether or not these guys will be able to have success playing at 160 and 180 ping on SSA servers. But why do this? Why do this is a question that you might be asking yourself in terms of why did RLCS make these new rules? There are some arguable benefits. I think that one of the biggest benefits is probably just less policing. It seems like they have less people working on the RLCS in general, and I don't know if they want to have everybody making sure every region is doing this, that, the other. I think apparently this is how Fortnite rules work, and so in general, it seems like everything's moving towards Fortnite. So instead, just let anybody play wherever they want. You don't have to worry about it as much, and you match up with your other game. So I'm expecting that's why they did it. But one of the other benefits that you do get from it is previously, countries could not play in the RLCS. Countries like Morocco and Drali, who was a resident of Morocco, could not contribute to any team. But now he could. Now, conveniently, he had actually already moved to France and had already gotten a team, which was nice that worked out for him. But if any other players who could all of a sudden play that couldn't play before, I'm not sure they told him very early, so they may not have gotten a chance to get on a team. Fortunately, that's not an issue for Drali. But going forward, the Dralis of the future can now just play in the RLCS right away. One player that I think maybe other people haven't been mentioning is Iraqi Ahmad. Iraqi Ahmad, who previously couldn't play in the RLCS, maybe can now, and he is a winner of Next Gen. The rest of the winners of Next Gen have been Rawas, Chronic, and Daniel, all players that have had a big part in our RLCS after becoming of age. Now, not only is the age younger, 13, but also he can now play just based on the fact that his region is included. So that could be nice. It could be nice to see a little bit more representation in the world than we saw in the past, but that's the question. Is the purpose of this to add more representation or not? Because if it is, it seems like it's going a little bit backwards. Because now there's a strong chance that someone outside of SSA, or at least by rules, someone outside of SSA, someone outside of maybe APAC, technically OC, I mean EU, SAM, anywhere, we could get a team that represents really a different region. And so if the goal for Psyonix, for Blast, who's now running their LCS, was to have a representative of the whole world major, that's not what they're going to get anymore. And if instead they were saying, we want everyone to play from anywhere so that we can get the best possible teams, well, the reality is they probably should take away a couple spots from some of the other regions. I think, SSA's spot historically hasn't done well at majors, so you could just give that spot back, or the APAC spot to another region that's stronger, but that means that these regions will never develop or never even have a chance to potentially overtake it. So it's nothing that anybody wants. I think when the other regions were announced and the fact that they were going to be included, everybody liked that. And so to me, this is a step back. This is a step back to saying, not only are we potentially not going to have those teams anymore, we're going to have another team that really shouldn't be there, but also is still not skilled enough to match the other teams. Like there's going to be let's say that this EU team were to take the one spot that is going to be in SSA, we would have a fifth EU team because the EU teams have now been removed or reduced to 4. Only this fifth EU team isn't even the best fifth EU team. There's probably tons of EU teams in between, them and who didn't get to go to the majors. So obviously it's not ideal. It's not how anyone would want it to play out. And we'll see if they make any adjustments. One thing that I do think is that people are underestimating just how hard it is going to be to win on that high ping, and underestimating, the SSA region in general. I think they're going to be a bit tougher to play against on their home turf than other people like to think they will be. But of course, I could end up being wrong, and that is one of the reasons why we made the video and watched the gameplay today, to see how it feels. Does this replay feel faster? Does this replay feel like it has players that are much higher skilled than the other ones? You know, if I were to have To Die For and Nugget play in a 1v1, you know, the modes that I know I can for sure estimate, I would think that Nugget would be very favored. I would think that Motion would also be very favored. But To Die For, you know, one of the players that runs ones from SSA, he wouldn't be, you know, too out of his league. I don't know about the rest of his squad. I know Snowy maybe has played ones in the past too, actually. I think Snowy might have even played more ones. I might be thinking of Snowy. But either way, you know, they have actually done well in those individual game modes. So who's to say they wouldn't be able to hang, you know, on their home turf against players at a disadvantage in the RLCS? That is a question that's going to be answered. You know, the one thing that we can rejoice about is long since has there been people saying, you know, this region could get smoked by another region's, you know, players that aren't even the best. Well, now we'll know. Well, now we'll know an answer of at least one example of just how bad that may be. And I think one of the big downsides that I forgot to mention in this video as the scrim comes to an end is the fact that, you know, this EU team, even though they're playing RLCS and SSA, it's only going to give SSA teams 1 or 2 chances to play against them to maybe improve. Other than that, they will not be scrimming, as proven by this replay right here. They will not be scrimming in SSA and giving a chance for those guys to improve even more. So we may be seeing less diversity from regions at the major. You know, is that a good sign for what's going forward? Should this be adjusted? That can be up to you.